The infamous legend of the Mothman has seemingly haunted the residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia for around 52 years. Ever since the initial sightings way back in November of 1966, Mothman has been widely debated throughout the world of the paranormal and cryptozoology. No matter what your theory on Mothman is, the sightings of this mysterious creature still pour in from all over West Virginia, and even around the world. Today, I will be sharing 10 allegedly true encounters with the ominous Mothman. If you have an encounter with Mothman or some other unknown creature, be sure to send it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Now, let's get into these creepy stories of Mothman. I'm not sure how to begin this, or where. This is such a frequent occurrence that I'm rather used to it. I hope you don't find me crazy, but I just need somewhere to share this. I live in the woods of Michigan and my nearest neighbor is at least a mile away. If you have ever lived in this wondrous land during the fall, you'll understand the beauty of it all. I was a young adolescent when this happened, and wished to go for a walk with my best friend, who we'll call Anna, along one of the many barely traveled, beautiful back roads. It was Thanksgiving, and about 9 or 10 at night. The full moon was lit beautifully as we walked. This night, I decided to tell Anna about my aunt's encounter with the alleged Michigan Dogman. Anna was afraid of the Dogman, and the moment I brought the story up, she instantly wanted to go home, to which I apologized profusely to her soon after. I thankfully convinced her to stay with me, and we walked another half mile or so before arriving at an old abandoned building we never really tried to go into before. We walked around the building, heading down a trail that leads through a cornfield and through some woods to home. Realizing we were about to head into a forest and afraid of Dogman, Anna refused to go at first. This was until I informed her if we turned around it would take much longer to get home. I'd convinced her to press onward, but, looking back, I wish I'd just have turned around myself. It wasn't long after we entered the woods that we heard the sound of wings flapping overhead. These weren't normal flapping sounds, however. These were the sounds like you've never heard before. They sounded like they were coming from something enormous. Upon hearing this, Anna and I froze, looking at one another before I finally got the courage to whisper to her, "Did you hear that?" Hear what?" she asked as she stared at the sky to indicate that she indeed had heard the sound. I held Anna's hand tightly, tugging it to indicate that we need to go. We need to pick up the pace. The woods seemed to almost envelop us as we soon started to walk faster. We decided we needed to keep our heads down as we walked, thinking foolishly that if we didn't see it, it wasn't real. It was after some walking and the occasional sprint that we neared the safety of home. This is when we heard the sound of a huge tree branch snapping and falling to the ground after another gust of wind came from the wings flapping somewhere in the sky above us. Squeezing tighter now, I screamed for Anna to run, and we both bolted towards the woods exit. We were both terrified as we ran. We never stopped in spite of Anna's cries of fear, and I maintained a great focus upon the porch light just outside the woods. As we ran faster, we suddenly heard footsteps from whatever was stalking us. The steps grew faster until we exited the forest and rushed home. It was when we exited the woods that whatever stalked us stopped abruptly. Once inside the house, I slammed the door, locking it and shutting off the porch light. My parents were still out for the evening, so Anna and I took every second we could to try to process what we had just experienced and calm ourselves down. Anna began screaming, asking what that was and shaking as she did so. I put a finger to my lips and told her to crouch. She did as I instructed, and we both sat there for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably just 10 or 20 minutes. It was after this wait that I got the courage to slowly look out the back door window. It was then I saw 2 glowing red eyes just staring. Anna was about to get up, but I told her to stay down, not wanting her to see what I was seeing. The creature with the glowing red eyes was tall, dark, but the eyes were what stood out the most. Staring into its eyes, well, it was unusually comforting. I didn't feel fear. I felt like everything in life was going to be okay. It was as though I could trust the monster in front of me. I was about to unlock the door when Anna slapped my hand away and asked me what the hell I was thinking. I told her I wasn't doing anything when we heard the sound of a car door slamming shut. My parents were home, and at that point, Anna made herself scarce. I looked out the window one final time only to see nothing there anymore. I wish the story ended here, but ever since that night I don't go out at night, nor do I go to the woods. That said, the creature I believed to be Mothman seemed to get bolder with time. It became less afraid of the house or hiding, from me at least. I've heard tapping on my window and I've seen the door handle jiggle when I'm the only one home. The Mothman grew smarter every time it came around and has always avoided the other people. One night, it stared at me through the blinds I'd forgotten to shut, and I just hid under my covers till I was brave enough to look out again. I, of course, found it vanished once again. I moved out of my parents' house at 19 and went to Florida, and I've never seen the creature since. I think it's time people understand the truth of this thing. I'm 23 years old, but I was 13 when this happened. I don't feel safe sharing the location, but I was hunting with my old man, so there were forests and even large rock formations in the area. Every time my dad and I went hunting, we'd make a point to set up camp and a fire near the stream upon arriving. The forest was an amazing place by day, but a place that grew far more mysterious and even scary by night. I always made a point to sleep prior to or at the same time as my old man, so I wasn't the only one awake at night. The hunts we'd go on were family tradition and annual. We'd always spend a week in the woods on every hunt. Now that I've set things up, you should understand the story behind the evil we encountered on this hunt. It was the first day of our hunt and we had found no deer. This was odd as there were usually deer everywhere, and we'd often have one bagged by the end of day one. Having no game killed, we went to bed around 10 that night. It was 3 in the morning when I awoke to the sound of rattling outside the tent. Looking outside the tent, I noticed the fire had gone out. It took me a bit, but eventually, I mustered the courage to investigate. I wish I hadn't investigated at all, though, if I'm honest. Remember those rock formations I mentioned earlier? They're about 30 or 40 feet tall, and about 10 feet in diameter. Gazing upon the highest rock, I saw it. It was some monstrosity that stood at least 6 feet tall and had blackish, brown skin. It had thin arms and legs, and I'm pretty sure its appendages were longer than most humans by a few inches. The thing that left me the most in fear, though, were those wings. It quickly turned in a flash, and what I saw haunts me to this day. The creature had a human face with no features outside of bright, glowing red eyes. The moment I saw this, I of course screamed my head off, at which point the thing flapped its huge wings and vanished into the night sky. My dad came out wondering what the hell had happened and why I was screaming. I told him everything that had happened, at which point he looked at me like I was crazy before telling me to go back to sleep. I, of course, didn't sleep at all that night. I kept seeing that monstrosity burned into my memory. The hunt always lasted a week, and I was terrified even after that. Every moment of every day, I would be scared that I would see that thing again, or that it would come back and try to get me or something. I never saw it again, but something else strange did happen. We never saw a deer that entire week. My old man chalked it up to bad luck, but I didn't believe that was why we never saw any deer. I believe this thing is why. The worst part came when we had to pack up. We had enough things that packing was a 2-round trip. It was when I was going back for the final set of stuff that I noticed the footsteps in the mud. They were huge and confirmed for me what I saw was real. The prints themselves looked like they belonged to a creature with 5 toes that were slightly larger than my dad's. They towered over anyone by 6 feet 8 inches. The strangest part was, the back of the prints were triangular and shaped and stretched out at least 3 inches back. We left soon after, and I thankfully have never seen anything like this since. Where do I begin? I was heading to Mexico with my mother to visit my grandparents so that we could, eventually, bring them back to visit us as well. This all happened back in 2014. It was about 2 in the morning as my mom was driving when I was chilling and playing a game on my phone. The only light we had on the road was our headlights as we were about 2 hours outside the border, and no one was on the road. I'm getting bored of the song I'm listening to as I play my game and decided to grab the auxiliary cord as to show my mom a specific song I was looking for. This is when, in the distance, I noticed a white dot in the sky. Curious, I began staring at this thing. I'm not sure what it is, but as I stare at it, all noises cease around me, including the car engine and even my own breathing. As it gets closer, it almost looks like a bird struggling to keep itself in the sky, maybe even drunk in its movements. Closer examination allowed me to realize this thing was no bird. It was very pale, white, and almost seemed like bones with no feathers. Looking back, it likely looked pale only because of the car headlights. I remember the moment I finally moved as the thing nearly hit the car before spreading its wings and at a split second vanishing into the sky. It honestly left me in this almost like awe state. The craziest part was its wingspan must have been twice the length of our car. It's only as I begin to process what I had seen that I asked my mom how she is. She says she simply isn't sure. Whatever we just witnessed, she seemingly thought it was ugly. I agreed with this thought though. Something to note was roughly 10 seconds after the creature flew by, the air smelled like sulfur out of nowhere. After we picked up my grandparents and had gotten to my aunt's house, with internet access, I looked up pictures of what I had seen. The only pictures that came up in the search engine that matched the description of the creature I saw were pictures of Mothman. I still believe I witnessed the Mothman that night. At the time of this story, my family was renting a home. I'm a sensitive, which means I can sense the dead, but I can't see them. Before this event, I had never had an encounter like this before. I was sharing a room with my brother at the time and sleeping when I awoke to the sight of a human-like shadow by the door. It seemed completely human in form until it lifted its arms and there were massive eagle-like wings. It looked at me for a moment before flying across my brother's and then my bed and out the window. I was shaken by these events and I couldn't go back to sleep after. A few nights later, we saw the thing fly over our skylight. My brother and I were both freaked out. I've since moved to another house, and I've seen it around there as well. The latest possible experience with this thing was on a sunny day while walking down the road. I saw a massive, bird-like shadow above me, but when I looked up, there was nothing there. No birds, no planes, nothing. Nothing at all. I'm not sure if what I saw was the Mothman or something demonic, but I hope it's the last time I have to deal with whatever it is, ever again. I don't know if people are familiar with the legend of the Mothman, but my grandfather has seen something matching its description twice now. He calls it the devil bird, but explains it looks like a large black winged creature. The strangest part is, both times he's seen the thing, a close relative of his dies soon after. I never witnessed this, but the last time my grandfather claimed to have seen the Mothman, I was in the house when I heard him yell to my brother to get his shotgun. I came out too late to see it, but he gave the description as a large black winged creature that came up out of the ground and flew through the trees. A couple of days later, our grandfather was crying uncontrollably in his backyard. He had received news that he had lost a very close relative. A few years later, when I was in the military, I relayed this story to some friends, asking them if they had ever experienced anything similar. One of the men mentioned when they were kids they had been watching a television program about the handicapped. Being ignorant kids, they spent much of the program laughing at the kids with afflictions. Once the program ended, it was dark, but they wanted to go out and play anyway. While they were standing around talking, they heard a flapping of the wings and looked to see this huge, black, bird-like creature flying above them. Naturally terrified, they ran back inside. I asked him if anything happened to his family after these events. He explained soon after they witnessed this creature, his grandmother passed away. I suppose in some cases, witnessing the Mothman is an ill omen. I pray I never witness this creature myself, and never have to go through these tragedies like my friends have. I'm just going to get straight to the point. My extended family lives in Portland, Ohio. I spent much of my summers as a youth in that area. It remains a very special place for me till this day. My uncle and aunt live on a hill overlooking the Ohio River, and I've spent many days fishing out there. Every summer I take a group of buddies to camp the lower land and fish for a few nights. Most of the time we just go for fun and drinking though. There's nothing like spending nights with your friends and doing night fishing and drinking any problems you have away. It's a nice way to get away from the world with friends. One evening, two friends and I decided to go walking down one of the many gravel roads in the area. As we were walking, I caught a light out of the corner of my eye. Looking at the distance, I'd say it looked like a house with all the lights on. I was totally confused and my friend continued to claim there was no house there. Deciding to check it out, we walked towards what I thought was a house. About 20 feet out from it, something appeared. Upon seeing this thing, we turned and ran into the opposite direction as fast as we could. I eventually got into my car and went driving the next day, when there was more light, to see if there was a house there. As I suspected, there wasn't. A few months go by and my friend brings over the Mothman prophecies. Imagine my shock when the thing in the film matched exactly what we all saw that evening. I called one of my friends who was there that evening and told them to rent the film. They eventually called me back in hysterics because they saw the resemblance. I still think about this at least once a day. I'm not worried about your belief in what we witnessed that night though. Just know the Mothman is real, and the Mothman is out there. Back in 2010, my family and I took a road trip to the northern regions of Mexico. The ultimate goal of this trip was to head all the way south to Campeche to see my family. This wasn't the first time we'd been on a road trip, but this time it was going to be far longer than our typical 8-hour trip. We were going to be on the road for 2 whole days. The first day we got up super early. It was about 3 in the morning when we left for our trip, so there would be no traffic. We were also hoping by leaving so early, we wouldn't have to see any animals in our path either. The trip was running smoothly. It was around 10 that night we pulled off the road for a rest, and about 2 in the morning when I awoke to the darkened roads and us driving again. It was when we came up on a hill that things got strange. Upon cresting the hill, we saw a pale, humanoid set of legs for a split second before they vanished. The creature itself looked almost bat or bird-like in form. You've got to understand, at this time I was extremely skeptical of anything supernatural. I was in, honestly, just disbelief at what we had just witnessed. Could I just be dreaming? When we finally arrived at the gas station, my dad asked if there had been any strange sightings on the roads. The attendant mentioned there being sightings of Mothman, but they personally hadn't seen anything. The rest of the trip I didn't sleep. I looked out the window wondering if I'd see the Mothman again. We made it back home safely, and I crashed very, very hard. We never saw the creature again, and needless to say, I'm definitely a believer in the supernatural now. This story was told to me by my sister's friend, who had that story told to her by her grandfather. The story takes place in the 70s in a house her grandparents lived in for 60 years. They had a big family, a father, a mother, 2 oldest brothers, and 4 younger sisters. The house wasn't huge, so the parents took one room, the brothers took another, and the sisters took the remaining room. Inside the sisters' room was an indoor veranda with glass louvers on one side. They're basically glass walls that opens up at a slant to allow airflow. In the girls' room, they had a corner bed against one of these louvers as Australian nights are really hot, and this was before the days of air conditioning. In the middle of the night, the father awakes to a blood-curdling scream from the girls' room. The father and his 2 sons rushed to the room to find 3 of the girls screaming and a 4th trying to get someone or something to let go of her neck. The 2 sons rushed to try to help her. The way he put it was that there was 2 long, pitch-black arms reaching through the louver, trying to choke his daughter to death. Instantly, he and his sons ran to her aid. One of the brothers freed the sister while the dad and son went outside to see what was trying to strangle her. They said when they saw it, they froze in place. This thing stood at 8 feet tall with glowing red eyes. Upon seeing them, it turned and jumped a 5-foot fence without touching it before disappearing into the night. Till this day, they have no explanation for what happened that night. They did some research many years later, and they now think it could be this creature called the Mothman. A few nights ago, after a heavy gaming session, I decided it was time for some much-needed sleep. Figuring I'd crash hard, I went to let my dogs out so they didn't pee in the place. Upon going downstairs, I felt this fear. It was almost palpable, but, being tired, I ignored it. Opening the door to the porch and calling the dogs out, we live in a residential area where I have 2 corgis that run off quite often when let out, as we have no fence and a golden retriever who usually stays put. I'm letting one of my corgis off their leash when she starts barking like crazy. I examine the area, and that's when I see, near the trees, this figure perched and staring at us. It looked like it had huge wings, glowing red eyes, and was quite tall. I'd say between 6, 7, and maybe even 8 feet. Upon seeing it, I ran back to the porch, and when I looked back, it was just gone, like it had vanished in the thin air. After this happened, a large number of bugs, moths, and beetles specifically, began lurking around my porch lights. Soon after they vanished, When I went back into my house and up to my room, I decided to do research on what I saw. A quick Google search answered what I saw. In Point Pleasant, West Virginia, close to where I live, there were many sightings of what people called the Mothman, and this thing matched the description to a T, and I am very, very positive that is what I saw that night. If any of you guys have any ideas how to maybe repel this Mothman from coming back, please comment down below letting me know. I don't know if this thing's dangerous, but I do fear for my dogs. Seven years ago, I was really into researching Mothman. It was something I even got two of my closest friends into as well. And during our time in research, strange things began to happen. We were originally from a resort town, which meant for 6 months the town was full of life, and for the other 6, it was rather desolate. One December night, we were driving around as we were bored and had nothing else to do. While driving, the subject of Mothman came up, off and on. Still driving aimlessly, we'd chill, take a smoke break, visit convenience stores, and blast music. Eventually, we wound up driving down a long, dark road in the woods. While driving down the road, all 3 of us noticed what looked like taillights ahead of us. It seemed to grow and be moving faster in our direction. We were a little shaken up when it vanished. An hour later, we went to my friend's house to chill with her. While speculating on what we saw on the road, we suddenly hear a shrill shrieking outside the upstairs window. When we ran out on the balcony and looked around, we saw nothing. After these events happened, we speculated if it was all just coincidence or something brought on by our Mothman research obsession. Maybe it was just an animal that shrieked, but I can't explain the taillights on the long road. Perhaps it could have been Mothman. We'll never truly know, as we never encountered anything like this since. These Mothman sightings are super creepy in nature. Red glowing eyes, long lanky limbs, massive bat and bird-like wings, and who knows what else. These sightings seem to be popping up in abundance all over the world. It seems no matter where you live, something is stalking you in the shadows. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, why not subscribe? Turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you have a creepy story you'd like to share in a future video, whether it's with a Mothman or something entirely different, be sure to send it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would be delighted to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video, be sure to comment down your favorite cryptid creature that you'd like me to cover in a video soon.